Okay, so got a nice little woodland here, but I thought it'd be nice to have a little ease back in with some acrylics and just have a little go at just having a little bit of a landscape. And obviously, they are beautiful, aren't they, bluebells? I know actually, some people may have already painted this. I know we've had like a little workshop on it, but it's just a really lovely one to do. But there's loads of nice spring ideas in the pack. So, pick anything that you fancy, and most of the things will apply to it. Or you might have your own photograph as well. But I've just picked this one. So, same as always with these sessions, really very much about experimenting, like exploration. Doesn't matter if you make any errors because it's part of like the learning process. And also acrylic's brilliantly forgiving because we can just go over you can just paste it back over the top again and it's absolutely fine. So it's not like watercolor where it's very translucent. It's, we can kind of block out some colors, and if you make a little error you can just block it back out in the other color. So really not to worry about that. So whichever one you decide to do, I mean, this one I picked because I suppose it's slightly looks slightly more tricky in that. Let me just show you the other one first. Now the other ones, we've got this one. So when we kind of looking at these initially and at what to draw out and what to do, when we tackle acrylic, we use a layered approach. So we start with the very back of the picture painting. We put those layers in first and we kind of overlay with the next layer and then the next layer and make our way forwards like that. So there's quite a lot of layers in this one, isn't there? That's why I've picked it actually. That aren't just like this one here is really quite straightforward because we wouldn't actually put any of this foliage on until right at the end. We'd actually pop the background, this part of the sky in first. But here you've got some very clear layers to build up all of these different colours, and these lovely paths leading up through, which is why I wanted to pick like some nice winding paths or paths through because they make a really lovely viewpoint into the painting. So here we can like put these into sections quite clearly. And the same here, there's a like lovely bridge and a path through on there. And again, this is one where you'd put this in over the top, but we would actually start to think about the colours behind it. And the same with this one. So with any of these that have got paths, basically, this beautiful path into spring, which is just what we needed. What we can start to look at, and I really don't do an awful lot of drawing when I do acrylics, just because we will go over an awful lot of it with paint. So there's no point in getting too engrossed in the drawing of it. But we need some things on to help us feel a bit successful. So what I've been looking at first is, and this, I'm just going to do this just to help out. I don't use an awful lot of grids to do landscape with unless it's got a lot of houses, but it's quite helpful just to see the path, for example. So we can see if we get our winding path in or our pathway in first, we then can start to just pop in a few sections of where we might be thinking about what, the types of colours and things that we'll be popping in. So all I'm going to do here is I'm going to look at whereabouts this path starts. Now it's actually here and it's covered up a little bit, but it does make you wonder whether it starts here and it's a bit overlap. But I'll just pop it there, look. A little bit coming over the edge of the path here anyway, some of this foliage. So we've got these two sections here. So because this is an A size, it will fit any A size papers. If you've got A4, A5, sorry, A5 the smaller one, A4, A3, you can go as big as you want to. This will be able to be scaled up just by using these two halves of a section here. So we can have a little look at whereabouts this fits in. Now, if I divided this into half, we're doing exactly the same. So I'm just going to that's my halfway mark. I'm just going to pop in the bottom edges of where, from the bottom corner, where my path would begin, which makes it much easier then once we start to get it in. So just pop a little mark on there. And then the same, what I want to do is this path kind of curves round and then it goes off at the top. So again, if you get the end viewpoint and the beginning viewpoint, it's really helpful. So if you wanted to, you could kind of just section this off, this little half into halves here. And then you can see that this path just goes off, and it's also almost in the middle of that section as well. So if I was to imagine, this is about halfway, this is just kind of the middle. So really, it just comes up just a little bit past, does the end there, kind of comes round. So I know it's going to about, it's going just above here, look. That's where it's going to end up. Then what we can do then is just nice and lightly, just kind of follow that pathway around, see what's happening. Like that. And then the same, so we've got this nice bank. Now it's a little bit more curved than that. It doesn't need to be perfect though, because we can change that with the shape of our, the painting that we're putting in the paint. And then this side here, just going to kind of follow that round. And just follow the curve round. Again, we're just having a little go, so it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. It kind of follows, curves round to the side there, and then it kind of vanishes into the distance there. When people talk about, sort of vanishing, where's the vanishing point? Well, it's there. It's just where it goes. And so we've got all of our bases covered because we've got all of these in. Now there's always room to kind of change things out as well. So the other thing I might pop in is this bit of a bank here. Now I'm not going to put in all of these trees because there's a lot of things going on behind the trees we need to get in first. So I am going to just have a little look at where that comes around there. And if you're not sure again, just have a little look as to whereabouts you think that this Bluebell section comes. And I'm going to go kind of, that's about halfway. So I'm going to have it finishing about here, starting about here, sorry. So that's where this bit of bank comes. And again, if we look, it kind of comes around the trees, and then we can't see it because it's kind of just here really, isn't it? And then a little bit more green comes around the corner. And then we've got all of these trees going upwards. So that's there, and they all come on at different angles, but we'll pop those in later. And then over this side, we've got this amazing bank of bluebell wood in between all the trees, and they're just gorgeous, aren't they? Look, all the light coming through the trees on here as well. So this is actually our biggest area of bluebells. So if we ignore all the trees and we have a little look, we can more or less see where that's coming through. So it's up in this. Again, we could divide that into a quarter. We can see that this blue bank of bluebells kind of starts almost near the top here. And if we followed it, I mean, you can be really specific. I'm not going to be really specific, but I'm going to just have a little look over there and look at, we get this nice lean down though. So you can literally just transfer that over just for a general idea of how it comes down. Now I'm doing my pencil quite deeply so you can see it on the screen, but if you're, when you're doing it, just do it nice and lightly. It just stops all of that dark pencil scrubbing up underneath. Okay, so yes, we've got this nice bank coming down here behind the trees. And then, the only other thing, so this is a big area here, the area of bank. We're not going to put those trees in because there's lots of like sky and things behind it. The only thing I might think about is behind here, this bank here, we've got quite a big, like thicker area of like quite green limey trees in there, foliage on the trees, sorry, so we can see. So I might be kind of just putting a general mark in as to whereabouts the colour, the background colour that we put in is coming through. And that's just for me, my knowledge. You don't have to pop these in if you can see it. Just helps me to remind myself that when I put these colours in, the base colour is going to be kind of more of a greeny colour here. And then it's a little bit darker over this side, but actually there's behind that even still, there's another quite a bit of light coming through. So we can think about the colours we're putting in the background here if we can peer through all of these areas. So that's it. That's all I'm going to put in. I'm not even going to put any trees or anything in yet because we can do that a little bit later. So you know, where to start? Well, if we start with our path, that's probably a good space. So what we want to be doing when we make our first starts with these areas is to put in some real some blocks of colour to start with. And what we'll do is we're going to look through and find a kind of a mid-tone. We're not going to go for on the path, we're not going to go for the lightest, we're not going to go for the darkest. We're going to find kind of one tone to start off with, because then what we'll do is we'll build that path up. We can then start to add some darker areas, shady areas. Then we can start to add some different tones for you know, for the path as well. And then we do exactly the same. We start to mix up some colours and do exactly the same for the bank here at the side. So obviously we've got some nice greeny areas in there as a base colour. And obviously we've got some bluebells in there as well. So we can start to pop those in. And then we can really focus in on the detail as we go through and start to look at the darks in there and then the lights in there. And we'll talk about all of these different colours for the bluebells as well. So so it will make a start on the path. So pretty much, I'll just get my little palette over here, copy it over. So I'm going to almost pretty much always have some white. Now on this particular picture, we do end up using quite a lot of white, and what we do is we use it as a tint. When with acrylics, when we say we're using a tint, it just means we're mixing something with white. That's all we're doing. And we do tend to use a little bit more when we've got some, you know, things that are quite light. So I'm also going to use a little bit of yellow. Now this one is called Naples yellow. It's a very light yellow, but anything lemon yellow, or if you've only got like a very warm yellow like this Cadian one, that's fine. Just pop it down. I'm going to use the Cadian one later anyway, so I'm popping that one out. But if you've only got one yellow, that's not a problem. Just experiment with the colour it makes. They will all make quite different different combinations. I'm going to have a tiny bit of brown in here for some of the shadows on the paths for later on. And obviously, you know, we've got lots of trees, so I've got a dark brown. You can get warm browns that are ready. If you've got a darker brown like raw umber or burnt umber, then that's a good one to use. The warmer reds, like burnt sienna, things like that, are very kind of ready brown. But so if you do have a dark one, that's fine. If you don't have a dark one, we can always add a bit of blue to it to kind of make the tone a bit more dark. So don't worry too much, all is not lost. And I'm going to pop, you could use yellow ochre as well in this mix. I'm going to pop a tiny bit of red on mine, very small area. And I know it doesn't look like we've got any red in, but again, this is how we, you know, about how we see colours. I've come to see, for me, there's a tiny kind of pinkish tone. I can't really explain what's in there, but it may end up that you might even see pop in some like a bit of purple or something. So if you're seeing some other tones over the top of here, that's fine. Now I'm going to pop on this board as well, this palette. I'm actually going to pop on some purple, because depending on where you look, sometimes and also in what light, sometimes things appear, bluebells appear to have a slight purpley tone, and in other areas they tend to have a very blue tone. So depending on what you can see, you could always add a little bit of purple or a little bit of blue to your blue. I've got some ultramarine blue for the bluebells. Oh dear. But you can use, if you don't have an ultramarine blue, you could try something like a phthalo blue or a different tone blue, and just to experiment really with what happens. I tend to use more ultramarine, but as I said, it depends on the light, and it's also when you mix a tint up as well with it, sometimes it makes a slightly different colour. And then obviously the other obvious choice, as well as this path, is to look at the greens, is a green. So a really good colour to use is something like, this one's called chrome green, but it's also pretty much like a sap green colour. Sometimes in a kit you can get very, very dark greens. They've got a lot less yellow in them. These are a bit more yellowy. So obviously the greens on here are more yellowy green. You can also maybe sometimes add a little tiny bit of something like an emeraldy green, but I would say that's probably you might need to tone it down in some areas, but just see what green you've got. And again, just have an experiment with it. I'm going to pop some of this chrome green, but actually it's exactly the same as the sap green on here. And then for the moment, that's really all I'm going to use for the time being. I don't really think I'm going to put much else in either, to be fair. I think quite happy with those colours. But if you start to see any colours, any other colours, then please do add them into your you know, to your mix. That'd be absolutely fine. So and I will move this little palette. Well, I will in a moment. So what I'm going to do is mix up a colour, a mid-tone for this path. Now again, this will depend on, this is, you know, this is why I've got this little bit of paper to try out, because it's just so important to try your colours as you're going. So I tend to have my colours around the outside, just a really easy organisational tip so that you can always come back to your colours and use them again. So I'm going to take a bit of white tint out because I want to mix up the colour to make this path. I'm not going for the lightest and I'm not going for the darkest. I'm kind of aiming for a stony colour. So I'm going to add a little bit, very small amounts to this white as we go. So that's at the moment is very warm. Doesn't look it on the camera at the moment, but it's quite warm. It's got like it's a very yellowy tone, and I don't really want a really yellowy tone. It's a little bit more pinkish. So I'm going to take the tiniest bit of brown, because brown is a very strong colour, and it can just so I'm adding the tiniest bits at a time just to build that colour up. So now it's that brown has taken the tone down a little bit so that it's a bit more stony, I would say. Might even take another bit. And this is the beauty of doing it step by step, and then you're not kind of going to lose all your paint in one go or anything like that. There we go. Right, so I'm more happy with that now. That's going. I may just add a very tiny tinge of this red, because I'm still seeing these more pinky tones in there, but I don't want to overpower it. And this is part of the colour mixing process when that's it, I quite like that colour. But you could add, if you're seeing purpley colours or whatever, you could add that in it. So once I've tested it, to make sure it is the right, yeah, that's just what I'm after. Once you've tested to see if the colour is the one that you like, then I'm going to go, obviously I was mixing with my small brush there, but I'm actually going to go to a bigger brush. Now I know I'm happy with putting this colour on. So I'm just going to add enough water. So I'm loosening it up a bit, not so it's going to run down the page or that it's too stiff to move. So what it should feel like when you put it on is it glides really nicely. It's a really lovely feeling. So if it drags, if it sticks, that means add a bit more water. Because what you want is to be able to cover it, but also it needs to feel a really nice process. So I'm just using the corner of my brush to go on that corner, but you could go down to a smaller brush if it makes you feel more comfortable to do that. So that's all I'm doing. I'm just kind of going in, just blocking. It's called blocking out this shape, this colour here. Now, there's a couple of choices. You can either work into the path now with the darks and then the lights, or you can leave that and then start to block in the other colours. This morning we blocked in all the other colours, but actually I'm just going to do different to how we did this morning, just to show you that you can do it different ways. And so what we would tend to do once we've got a mid colour on is we would then tend to go in with a darker shade. So the darkest on that, you know, in this path here. And this, I'm just going to go in, I'm going to mix brown, red, because that's what I'm seeing. But some people were seeing purple this morning, and that is absolutely fine if that's what you were seeing. And if you can see purple instead, you go with that colour, because no I'm always going on about this, but we all see colours so differently. So, you know, you just can't tell. Right. So you can go in, you know, once we're kind of working in some of these colours, you can just have a little go, like just moving your brush up and down with it. And if you want, you can, it can be blended a little bit if you're working quite quickly onto the other colour. And all I'm doing now is looking at kind of those little shadows on that edge of the path. And I'm really just having a go. I'm holding my brush near the end just to make it a little bit more wibbly, really, and being a bit brave with the paint. Just having a little go and just kind of so we see, don't we, like the ridges in the path or bumps, or it might be the shadows. So those are the things I'm just trying to recreate now. And I'm not really, I mean, you can be really precise, but I've done the opposite here. I'm just trying to make it just a little bit loose. You know, if you feel like making dots at the side or whatever, or lines or whatever you feel like is coming out of your hand, then go with it. Just really, you know, go for it. Big part of this process is really, really just enjoying having a go at mark making, and, you know, moving that paint about is really, really lovely. Very nice thing to do. And then here we go. So there's also a few little greeny patches in there. I don't know if you can see them. Very, very, now this, the greeny on it, or it might even be a bit yellowy. So I'm going to put a tiny bit of green in with this yellow, light yellow. I'm just going to thin it down so that it will go on comfortably. And I'm just going to just dot on whatever I can see there. We're just recreating. It's really good fun, actually. Really nice. But you pop on whatever you can see and however it feels. Just you know, don't be frightened to go for it. Just layering up there. That's exactly what we're doing. We're blocking out areas, then we're layering up with shadow, mid-tone shadows, brights, and then lights. So there we go. And then what we've got here is then we would finish with a highlight. So wherever the light really falls, you've got to really look because it's not everywhere. People are often tempted to go straight in with a white highlight, but unless it actually is white, which I'm not sure it is, because that over here is very light. This is lightish, but again, you can decide if you want to go in with white or not. I'm going to just go in with a very slight pinky tint. So I'm going to use a tiny bit of this colour that I've already, this colour here that I've already used. I'm just going to add it. So it's ever so slightly tinted, but not a lot. So it still looks very light on the camera. And then sometimes you can just kind of layer it up. If you want to get like a textured feel, you can just kind of look at where those little highlights are going up the path or down the path, and then just start to pop it on. What it does as well, it helps to kind of put some texture in sometimes. But yeah, so what you tend to get, it's where the light falls naturally on the path. Usually the bits that are sticking up a little bit to catch the light. And we can follow this process all the way through with each of those sections that we're doing there. Obviously, we've started with the path. So I suppose what I would start to think about next is getting some of this green foliage in. So again, it's like thinking what mid-tone shall we go for? So this is to do with the greens. These greens are very yellowy green, but we obviously need some kind of a base. So I'm going to go in with this sap, well, this is called coin green, but it's similar to sap green. It's a warmish green to start with. And if you only have a very dark green, you can start by warming your green up with some yellow. Now I'm not going to pop this straight on. if I do that, it's, you know, it's quite light in some of these areas, sort of too dark. But what I can do is bring it into some of these other areas, for example. And when I'm looking at the greens here, there's a real difference. So this is where we like just our kind of power of observation and starts, because I'm just going to move things back actually, just bear with me. I think it was just blocking that colour a bit. We have these very, very light, like yellowy, almost white greens sometimes here in the middle. These are very yellowy, very barely any green. And then here we've got some quite, I would say this is a bit sappy green, but then in the middle here we've got almost some blue greens, because it's so moved in with the bluebells that it is almost bluey green. And also one tip is, like, the cooler the colours, they tend to, the cooler or darker the colours, those colours recede, and the warmer and lighter colours, they're the ones that come forwards. So we can use that to our advantage. We can almost mix up a little green here that's got a blue in it. I'm going to do that. Now that blue green, once we pop it in, will actually have the appearance of going backwards. So I'm just going to put a tiny bit of water in there. I'm just going to test it. So it's getting darker. I'm going to go even darker with a bit more blue. And again, that blue is going to help it go backwards into the area. Just bear with me a moment there. Just going to alter my camera slightly. I'm going to pop this little light on. There we go. It's a bit dark on this side of the picture. There we go, that's better. So, so there, you see that blue-green? We can get some of those, we can have almost 3 different greens within this one, even when we're putting the mid-tones on. So I'm going to save that for popping at the back. I'm going to use this one a little bit around here, pretty much on its own, because we can add highlights and things to them anyway. But then I want to really, really light green, fresh green here, yellowy green. So I'm going to take some of that green, oops, here, add some yellow. So you could add a bit of yellow, lemon yellow and white, for example. Let's have a look, see if that's going to get to where we want to. Okay, it's coming. Let's have a look. Put those 3 greens together. And this is when, you know, obviously when you're testing your colours, that will help as well. So I'm going to try a bit of this other yellow to see if it just gives it a bit more of a, okay, we'll test. All right, well, this to me is even lighter, so I'm just going to go a little bit, a tiny bit of a white tint. Sometimes we put a lot of white, it can really make it almost a bit too pastel-y. We can lose that kind of warmth to it, but we'll try this, see what happens. Okay. Yeah, it's getting there. So you can always pop a bit of yellow in if it feels like the warmness has come out of it. All right, so we've got, just to start with as a mid-tone, we can change these as we go, as we build the colours up anyway. We've got three different greens there. So we've got the blue green, just the sap green for over this side, and then this green. So what I'd be thinking about doing is actually starting to apply this. I'm going in this time rather than a flat brush. I'm going in with a big round brush. So, you know, this one is a size 12, but it depends on the size that you're using. And also if you feel like you're not getting enough control, then that's fine as well. So what I'm going to start doing is I'm going to go in with this light colour here. And I'm going to start to almost use my brush to kind of make the shape of clumps of grass, because so you could go in and just flatten it all down. That's absolutely fine as well to do it that way. But I thought, well, I'll just try. Sometimes you can actually get some of your brush strokes in there, because the clumps of bluebells and the clumps of grass actually work well on a brush. and, you know, making this shape while you're going. And also it's quite nice just to add a bit of texture on there. So again, you could even use a little bit of your shadowy one just to pop in, because it's damp, it'll blend quite nicely there. You can then pop in, and this is like I was saying, we blocked it all out this morning and then we went and did the shadow everywhere, but we're just doing it the other way around here. Just getting a few of those shadows. So wherever you can see any of those little bits of shadows, when you put those darker areas of in, what that does is create depth, because the shadows recede, so it's the dark colours, and it starts to create those little clumps, you know, deeper clumps in there. So we've got those in, and I'll come back with the highlights because I'm not quite ready with the colour for that. So then again, we've got this nice bright colours over here. So I'm going with a bit of sap green there. I'll have to mix up a bit more actually with this orange, yellowy. And then again, we've got all these kind of little tiny clumps all coming around the side. You can make the shapes for those, press them down, you know, just do what comes naturally to you. We've all got like a natural kind of the way that our brush hits the paper. Sometimes finds a bit of time takes a while to find it, but we get there. Okay, and then what I'm going to go in with now is I'm going to go in and start to try and create some of these. If you see, this is what I love about Bluebell woods, because you get these natural, you know, natural like swathes of them together. And obviously these follow pathways, don't they? And then you often get like the green between them as well, where the natural pathways where people walk. So that's why it always looks lovely. You know, it's so naturalistic, but you still get these lovely patterns of bluebells coming through, which are just beautiful, aren't they? And I can't wait actually till they come out. So I'm going in with my darker one that I mixed up, because I want to get the ones at the back that are kind of out of the way in the shadow. So I'm just trying to work out whereabouts that will go in, and it doesn't matter too much. We're getting a general idea of where it will be. It doesn't need to be absolutely perfect. Just need to kind of have a little go at getting that in there. And then the sap green ones are a bit further down. There's a big kind of, so we're ignoring where the tree trunks go actually is what we're doing. Because the tree trunks will go straight over the top. And if we try and put these all around the edge of the tree trunk, it's such a lengthy job. So I'm still using my brush to kind of make the shape around. You can see it's kind of, there's still some darkish ones there. So I'm just going to go back in with a bit of blue again. And then we can just start to get these in. And this will start, you can see on mine, it looks really childlike at the moment. That's totally normal to be expected at this stage. So remind yourself to take a sigh and go, it's fine. It's supposed to look like this, because it's that process with acrylics where we're building up the layers. It doesn't look like it should, and our brain does not like it at all. So it's quite normal to feel a bit like, oh no, it's not going right. But no, it's supposed to look disorganized at this stage, so don't worry too much. So then I'm moving on to the you know, this bit here where there's kind of in between these bluebells, there's more green. There's obviously big areas of blue, but then there's green in between. So I've just gone straight in with my chrome green, sap green, whatever you want to call it. Just going to pop that in just so that there's enough going on between the layers of bluebells. So obviously the bluebells come protrude out above this area. So this again, you know, as we get nearer the front, we can see more details. We get more of these stick effects. So you can actually go in, make your marks, you know, kind of a bit bolder in here, a bit more grass-like. we'll cover a lot of this up with the bluebells anyway, but this just stops us having like big gaps between the bluebells, as though, you know, they're just kind of coming up through fresh air, because we, of course, they come around, don't they, through, grow through those grasses. And we can lighten up some of these areas as well. Obviously, there's quite a big bit of blue there. And we're just keeping going like that. So, you know, wherever you can see, there might be a few more around the front that are a bit lighter, etc. Just if I can see them, I'm just going to pop them in. You know, just keep looking. So a lot of this is a power observation, what we can actually see when we really, really look. It's really quite wonderful when you start looking at all these things and think, oh my gosh, yeah, I can see that, and I can see that. So obviously what we've got missing here is a lot of the colours for the bluebells, and we'll go on to that in a mo. But I think probably a good time to take a pause and just see how you're all getting on. Okay, lovely. So starting to kind of block out quite a lot of our picture. We may have had the odd tree or whatever on there as well. Because it's just very tempting, isn't it? Just to pop it on, which is absolutely fine. So what we're thinking about, obviously the other colours in there obviously are the bluebells. So again, as we said, depending, like if you look at these at the back, you've got some very dark bluebells in there, like this dark, the shadowy bits, and then some very light highlights where the sun's kind of streaming through there. And then, you know, some very light. These are obviously, this half is very much in the sunlight here. There's a lot of light coming through these trees here. So you get it's, you know, quite pastely bright colours, you know, with probably a white tints in there as well, makes it quite harsh. Whereas you get this kind of much more of a rich blue and the purples and things over this side. So have a little look at what you're doing. If you've So have a little look at your blue. I've got a ultramarine blue, which is kind of typical of what you get in a lot of sets. But really, you know, if you've got as long as it's not like a really, 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 really very, very dark blue, that can be a bit harder to lift. But have a little look, have a little go at mixing it with a bit of a tint until you get to the colour that you want to do. I'm popping a tiny bit of white in there. And you may, as I said, if I just test it and then again keep testing. So you see I'm more than happy with that in there. There's a lighter tint with it. So I'm going to go with this that I've just mixed up. So that's just literally blue and white tint in this section here. Just a little water on it. And the same thing applies. You can kind of start to get some of blocking some of these. I'm going to do this middle section here. There's quite a lot. We're still quite far away. We're getting nearer here and a bit more spread out. So I'm going to go just, I might go down actually. So I might go down a little bit in size with my brush in the middle if I'm not quite getting the desired effects. It feels like it's a bit long, you know, they get longer, don't they, as they get nearer to you, where these are almost like lots of dots. And here they get a bit more spread out and they kind of lengthen. So you can just start to kind of pull them down a little bit so that there's a suggestion here that there is stalks in there somewhere and they're a bit longer. So again, I'm still more or less quite happy with this colour here that we've got. If you feel like you need to add something to it, that's absolutely fine to get the desired colour. So as we get forwards here, so I'm going to go in with a darker colour. I'm going to go in at the back here. I'm going to go in with this shadowy before I put the highlights on. So I'm going to go, again, it's quite darkish blue. So you could even put a bit of blue and a bit of purple, or you could try adding a tiny bit of red to your purple, to your blue. Make a bit of a purpley tinge, but just I would add a really small amount because sometimes it can overpower. And I'm going to pop these in at the back. Now I may have to just dab these on, I think. So where you've got these coming down, I'm going to go in, even though that these are really dark ones, add a little bit more purpley to that. even though these are dark ones, that's fine, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in with these bright highlights over the top, and then we'll get this lovely contrast, so you'll be able to see, you know, the areas that are here. These are just like the back ones. Um, yeah, be able to see, you know, whereabouts we're going to pop in some of the lights on top, and you'll get this nice kind of dark shadowy bit, so we'll be able to see which bits are there where the light shines on it, and then the contrast of that will be really quite nice. So then you're just having a little look at all the colours that are in here, and if you haven't got any that are really dark, there might be a few just weaved through the front here, so I might pop those in because I've got this colour mixed up. So I'm just going to look, and you kind of start to see almost a few stalks coming through. They might actually be a bit brownish, but or you could go in with a purpley brown. I'm just going to pop in, and they're actually, when you zone in on them, they could be seen as being as sticks that are coming through, or you could also interpret them as being a little bit of the stalks. So on this size anyway, photograph. So I'm just going to pull some of those through, and then I can work in onto that some of the colours of the bluebells. So we've got this section in the middle, this that's a kind of a bit darker. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go right to the back now and try and pop in some of these really light highlights that are in there. So I'm going to take my ultramarine blue, I'm going to take some white, a white tint, because it's very light, isn't it, at the back? And again, this is where I just want to test it, make sure it's light enough against that colour so there's a contrast. And actually, I think I might go even just add a little tiny bit more white. This again is when we're testing all of these things, we get an idea from testing it. And then here, this is where you can decide whereabouts. I've gone definitely down a smaller brush now. You can kind of go in, you know, whereabouts are these areas, the lighter areas. Get some over the top actually, and some over. And then when we put our trees over the top, it'll just naturally show, you know, come through. And then there's some quite big areas here, so I'm just going to pop those in. You can even kind of bring them between, so you can make little clumps if you want to as well. That's all we're doing, we're popping in these as we go. Here we go there. And then any other little ones that are lighter as well, I'm going to put the ones over this side too. And what we can do then is use a tint, the one, it could even be the white one that you've done, to actually show the contrast on these. So, because we've got the darker area of the flower, you often, with the bluebells, that's how you can see them, isn't it? Because you've got this lovely contrast where the light hits, or the light, the two-tone of the bluebell. So I'm just going to kind of add this like on an ad hoc basis. I'm not really, it's kind of mindful mark making. I'm not just like just splatting it on, but I'm not really, I'm kind of keeping it moving so it's got a natural flow to it. And again, this will all change. So I'm going to go in with some of these lighter ones that we've popped in here over this side, where we've got this swathe of really light ones over here, where this, it's really obviously because of the amount of light that's coming down on it. And then any other gaps you've got, have a little look round, see, because then you might suddenly think, oh yeah, there's a few there, look, coming through here. Oh, there's a few there. And then we can still add those in as well, nearer, you know, as we go. And then in. And again, you know, you can pop alternate colours through. You could even try, if you wanted to make it a bit more purpley, just see how it's going. So then obviously now we're coming, the nearer we get, the more detail that we can pop into the foreground with these flowers. So it's just like thinking, you know, what's that shape that it's making? They are quite light in places here. Again, they're a bit more spread out, aren't they? So again, you know, it's how do you make this kind of create this frilliness? So you can literally kind of go in and just make like a frilly, just move your brush like really higgledy-piggledy motion. Try and kind of make the long stem, the long flower head, sorry, you know, and just kind of get that. Because what happens is, even if it does it, it's not exactly like a bluebell. We start to know because our brain's telling us. It starts to mark out the fact that these things, this is what's going on in this picture. It's a bluebell wood, especially when we get the trees in. It's just like, ah, yeah. So we don't always have to have an exact replica to make a painting work really well. We can just have like the suggestion there, and then the mind makes up the rest of it about it. Yeah, just dot it on even. And then if you want a contrasting colour, then you can, you know, you can pop those in. Just pop them in within the flower. And there we go. We're just keeping adding. Might be that it gets lighter down one end, so we can pop more in. I'm just working through and just adding a few little touches in there. So I suppose the one thing, and then maybe some darker over this side. So I need a few shadowy ones. I'm going to go a bit purpley over here. And then what's missing from here when I'm looking is there's no change in these grassy areas. The park is the only bit we've put a little bit of dark into. So this is the only bank here that's got a little bit of something, you know, shadow in it. So there's a bit more shape to that, whereas this is very flat in the middle. So what we would need to do then is go through and pop these nice bright, real light patches through. So we didn't do that. So we need to bring the highlight out, and that will give it a little bit more shape because we've got some shadowy areas, some mid-tones, but the light colours will make those kind of, you know, jump forward a little bit. So it's just thinking, how do you make that light green? So you can go in with a bit more yellow. And then whichever green you've got, actually I need to put a bit more on there. So just keep going until you're happy that you've got like a contrasting green. Now at the moment that's the same. We don't want to be putting the same colour over the top, otherwise it's not going to zing. But it is, I think, quite pastely. So I am going to pop a tint in there. Because this is where the real yellow is, isn't it? So like here, you can start to see there are some there's some nice foliage here, isn't there? So on these stems, there's a few lovely little, I don't know if they're nettles actually, probably are, or something like that. But they really kind of pop forwards with the light pop. So we can go in with a nice little tint. Those ones will come like through, they're kind of protruding through the bluebells here and all the way through. So you can just pick out where they come through and just pop them in. Just wiggle your brush about a bit. Like that. And just pop stuff in. And then again, so have a little look through here. So sometimes you get like, look around these lovely little, just little patches of light. Just kind of glimmering through, just on these banks. And then there, again, I think it's where really the light is coming through the trees, isn't it? And it's kind of shining down, so it does not really making a contrast there. I'm just going to add a little bit more white to my mix there, just so that there is a contrast and we're getting these nice light areas coming through, because we're not putting massive detail in, we're not trying to bring it forwards, but we're putting enough detail in that it makes a difference to, you know, makes this nice contrast so we can see. You can see the difference between these little patches of light and then the other areas of grass. So we've got quite a lot going on there, haven't we? Done loads on there. And then again, you can even go in with a real little highlight. If there's anything even lighter, like there's a few areas in here, it's the lightest blue tint ever. So I'm going to go in and add a tiniest bit of blue to much more white. And I'm just going to pop those in, just a few areas. We've built our layers up as we're going. Okay. Sometimes we put all the base layers on. Pop a few of these highlights through, really light ones. And use a pen much lighter here. Put all the sun shining on them, all the light coming through. There we go. And then what you can do is you can have a look at the path, where the path meets, and then make your mind up. Is there anything like that's darker in there that you want to kind of work on? So if there are any, sometimes what you get is just at the edges here underneath, you might get a little bit more depth in there. So I've just popped just a little bit of brown in there actually. But you can just put a darker version. You could use dark blue or even a bit of darker green in there. And then it just creates the feel that there is, these lovely, this bank is kind of just tipping out over onto the pathway. There we go. Okay, so we're getting this feeling much more 3D, isn't it now? Everything starts to feel like it's starting to take shape. I fear not, because we're obviously now we're looking at the background, so that will make a little bit of a difference too. So what we can do is start to block out the colours that go behind here. So I would be looking at, for example, this area here is very light, so I'm going to actually paint in behind here. But I'm actually going to think about the colours that I put on before, so that I can kind of move them around into each other a little bit if I want to. So I'm going to go with a very light colour. I mean, you could even leave your paper white if you wanted to. You could do that, and just leave it white coming through behind. Or you can go in with any other colour that you want. You could even go in the blue if you love blue or something. You can do that. So look. I'm going to go in with white. I'm going to go in with, again, you can just decide. I'm going to go with this solid blue actually. To make it really, really light. And that's it. That's all I'm going to do. And I'm thinking that this is very light greens and things here. So I'm just going to block this out behind. Actually, I might go back to using my flat brush because I do really like a flat brush to get the background on it just easier for me. But again, you can use any brush that you like, flat one or a round one. I just find it sometimes goes on more evenly. So this colour should now come through. The thing is, like, it's really difficult to draw all these really fine fine bits of trunk and the trees and the little branches. So to try and put the sky in behind it really does, it's very difficult, one, and secondly, it's also, it can look a little bit false, like you are putting the sky between it. So I'll pop that behind, and I'm going to bring that into this area a little bit as well, where the where it's going to go, where the sky is going to go there. And then we've got this lovely, when you look at here, we were talking about these different greens, weren't we? So there's almost a little bit of a light colour coming through there, but I feel like it's a bit yellowy. So I'm just going to go pop a bit of yellow and a bit of white in there. Just to see what that looks like. Maybe even a bit more white in it. Okay. Bit thin. I'm going to thicken it up a bit because it's there we go. So I can see it coming through these trees. I'm just going to put this through the back here. We can paint over that, as I said. And then, so I'm bringing that in. And then through this middle bit here, we've obviously got these really dark greens overlapping and things like that. And then we've got this kind of section here where you've got some darker green and then you've got lighter green. So I'm just going to make up, almost use yellow and white. So light, isn't it, that there? And this is our base colour, of course, and it's the ones that are behind the trees. Some come behind that. We can pop in a base colour, then we can overlap, and then we can pop more on. Really light, sorry, yellow and white. And then trying a little to make a little bit of green. So you can make a little bit of green in there with that yellow and white. So light coloured. I'm going to go even lighter. Even yellower. So I think the thing is, it's very yellow, isn't it, the edge of it? Okay, so again, I'm just kind of going to bring in, just maybe bring you with a slightly different, like rounder brush. Just start to almost bring in, you can even like kind of create the shapes of those over. We're just kind of blocking in this very light colour over the top. And again, it doesn't have to be the final colour, it's just we're building it up. But then what I might do is kind of bring in some of those slightly dark colour by mixing a little bit at a time. I'm just using that mix that I've already got and adding a bit more green in there. The other way you could do this obviously is mix your green up separately and then keep adding it to this yellow, this other mix. And then I'm just kind of, it's getting a, you can bring it, overlap it a little bit because it'll all be coming to one, and then obviously it gets very green in this middle section. So we're adding more green again. And we're just going in like that, getting greener and greener, more green and more green. Oh. Just like that, really. Behind it, and then obviously coming out the side here, we've got a little bit of green and a bit of foliage here. I would probably just go in with the same similar green, but maybe pop a bit more yellow into it again. And out the other side, but that will overlap over the front of this tree once we get that in. So we're just getting just a few colours, a few greens coming over there. You can just kind of pull it across. It doesn't have to be perfect. So we're going to put these trees in anyway, and then it'll give us a better idea. So we've just got some background colours behind the trees that we're going to pop in a minute. And this bit will be really fun. I think you'll really enjoy it. I'm just going to take one And one last pause before we move on to the last bit, just to see how everyone's getting on, because I know it's there's quite a lot going on there. Okay, so we've got all sorts going on now, and then we're going to really kind of pull it all together with by starting to think about getting our trees in. So this is quite exciting, really. So there'll still be a little bit of overlayering and overlapping to do anyway, even when we get our trees in, because there's still things going on right behind and things going on at the front. So I think I'd be inclined, I'm just looking here, we could start in the background there. What we need to be thinking about is what's at the very back. So I'd be looking at some of these trees down here that are right in that back that you can just kind of see behind all of these leaves. So I'm going to go in with those. Now you'll notice that you kind of get half, these ones right at the back here are half and half. So they're a little bit brown on one half. And it's almost like a greeny white tint down the other half. So I'm also going to pop in a little bit into this brown. I'm going to pop a little bit of blue in there, just because we're going right into the background. It'll help it kind of go back, it'll help it go backwards disappear into the background, these very, very, these layers right at the back. So I'm going to pop these in. Now it's a bit obviously difficult, so we're looking kind of like right in the background here. They're quite thin, aren't they, these ones at the back? We can't always see them, and they don't always start in the same place either. So some of them are further back, some of them are further forward. So I'm still looking at the ones right in the very background here, and we'll cover over those. So I'm not even making them, don't even need to be that perfect, because these are the ones that start, these bigger, thicker ones that we can see. So as long as I've got them coming, these ones coming a little bit down where we can see them, then that's the main thing. And then again, we just have like a bit of green, a bit of white tint for the other sides of those trees, where we've got it's got a bit of brown in it as well. It doesn't really matter, to be honest. It's just because we're at the back. So you get down one side of the tree, it makes it lighter, and then one side of the tree, and then obviously the other side of the tree is darker. So we've got a highlight and a low light and a shadow. So I'm just going to get these trees in here, the background ones, these trunks. We do make it up a little bit as well, to be fair, because it can get a little bit confusing. Where is the tree that we popped in? So again, I'm looking right through these, these trees at the back. What's going on here? And then as we're working our way forwards here, we can start to then look at some of these bigger trees. So I'm going to go in with some nice dark browns there. And you do, obviously just choose the size of your brush that you want as well. So I'm going to look at this one here, and this is where you can use that little quarter grid to see whereabouts these trees start. So this one floats a little bit above it here. So I'll get that one in there. And again, the trunks and things are all a little bit higgledy-piggledy, aren't they? This is still behind. I can't really see. Because even here, look, this trunk here is behind. This is a longer trunk that comes a bit further, just a bit further down. We're just looking at where they come on this bank, really. And then what we can start to do, we can start filling in some of the gaps behind it as well. Look. Ones that come between that one and the next one. And again, we can look at where we get any of these lighter patches coming through on the fronts of the trees. We don't really get it on these particular big ones here, do we? But there might just be a smaller patch of it, just a little one, tiny bit near the trunk, so you can start to kind of pop a bit of texture on and things if you can see it. And then even there, while we've got these two on, we've got these now. We've got this tree trunk. You can't see it, it's just underneath here actually. But I think there's a trunk under there. Let me just move this Got this bit of tape on, so let's see. Is it just branches? No, it's just branches coming across. So this is where we can get like that. These are very dark, aren't they? So I might even be, just because of the shadow on them, I'm going to take this brown and I'm going to take a bit of blue, mix those together because that will make it nice and dark. And then again, it's like just not worrying about too much because they're all higgledy-piggledy branches. As long as you can get them to move, you can just use the very tip and then just kind of like just make them a bit, they're not symmetrical at all, are they? You get these lovely, like just the crisscross over, they're all over the place. They kind of come off to the side, look. There we go. You get little those little V's in them. And then there we go. So we've got the other trunk there. So we know obviously these are all crossy over the front of these other ones. We're just creating these lovely shapes. And then when we started to get those in, we can then look at what's happening because there's some foliage down. I don't know if you can see where we get these kind of darker greens here. So I'm going to go in. This is quite dark green, so I'm just going to go in with some sap green and a bit blue. So make it just slightly darker green. It's not really light at this stage. And then we can then start to kind of dapple that. Now it will if it's still really wet, it will kind of like smudge it a little bit. But if it's mainly dry, you can kind of just go over the top. And we're just popping in some of these lovely colours over the top. So we get these dappled, these like the leaves coming in here over the top of these trees. So that's how we're kind of building it up really. And they'll get a bit lighter over here, but I'm not going to put those in until I've got this tree in here. So I'm going to look for my next big one, which I think is there. And that sits right down as though it's sitting on a little mark there, as though it's sitting on right on the three, isn't there? There's one, another one on the same line, another one just above it there. Those are the three big ones. So you can kind of pop little lines as to where they go. And then this big one here, again, you've got, they're lovely actually. They're so nice to do. Really are. You can just almost, just pull some shapes down. Just enjoy getting really into the tree shapes. They're just lovely. Where the next one comes. Get the downward one shapes in. And this is the thing with trees. It doesn't really matter if you kind of make them a little bit thicker than they are, because nobody knows, do they? Like your tree. It's like they're all so different. And then you can make the thinner ones, but just by using just the tip of your brush, can start to drag those across and just really kind of wibble by having not much control on your brush by having it further down. Just kind of like really loosely getting some of those lovely tree shapes in. Just kind of pulling it round, dragging it round. The key as well is making sure there's enough on your brush. You load up enough and actually make sure it's moving, so there's enough water in it that it kind of moves across the top of the page. We're just recreating these lovely marks. And again, as I said, it doesn't matter if we don't kind of make the correct shape for everything. And then again, you can have them crisscrossing down and over and across. It's just really lovely to do. And then the same again, you can get the next one in. So obviously we've put a mark whereabouts that one's going to start and go in. And we're just building up our little kind of bank of knowledge as to, how these trees sit next to each other, the knots in them. You get those lovely kind of gnarly bits on the tree. And then again, if it goes behind, we'll pop that in. before we kind of concentrate on this next bit of foliage that comes around each section of the trees. And it might be that there's, there's some nice loose bits coming up through here, through these trees here, just a little bit into the canopy. Even here, these lovely bits coming over, just pulling them all around really. From other trees that are behind it. And it may be that, there's a few more trees in the background that we've not popped in yet. Pop those in behind if you can see those. That's fine. Just building up that little kind of picture as we go. And we put the last one, the third one in here that's quite close to this one. Okay, and again, have a little look at the colour on the bark of the trees. Are there any highlights in there? There might not be many. Might be kind of a bit of a green tinge on one of the tree trunks. And pop that on. We're just making those, aren't we? Just like popping all these wonderful colours in before we move on the next bit. And again, we can then, once it's started to dry down one side, we can start to think about this kind of foliage here, for example, that's coming all the way around this tree, and it's quite bright and acidic. So again, you could just go for a very yellowy, and it'll really show up against those dark colours anyway. So I'm just going to go in green and yellow. Really bright, lovely. Just test your colours if you're not sure. And you can go in with yellows as well if you want to be a bit, kind of brave with it, and that's absolutely fine going with some yellows. But sometimes a bright yellow dip, in amongst those colours actually come out really quite nice. Just testing them, sometimes we still need to kind of test the colours out. I'm actually going to go in with some more yellowy colours overlapping these greens. Just start to layer up the foliage in the tree here, all the way around there. And again, we can start to do that here as well. So we can start to kind of build up the foliage over the top of some of this and behind some of these as well. Just with like little brush marks like that. And then again, as it gets nice and light here, we've already kind of put a base on, haven't we, for these really light ones here. But we can start to kind of add more textures. And you can kind of make like the dot, like make dottiness, like kind of dots and things like that. Make the texture of the leaves too. Just have a play really with creating these textures. They're just lovely, aren't they? The colours, you weave through the colours. So you sometimes get like a dark colour weave through or a lighter colour. And then you may even just have, some of these have got almost got like, well, when you start to put these tree trunks in, you can just see they're really quite, they just kind of come through, don't they? You can really just see them shining through the little tiny marks. Just building them up, and then the next one that comes over, it comes over into this quarter here, doesn't it? So it's there, that's the next, but again, it's getting further away. It's slightly higher up. And we might only see just a little bit of it going up into the canopy. And then just a few. Oops. A few little and some of these come right over here and over into the other side. So you can kind of just pop a few of these back into place. It's really lovely. And then again, we're looking at these, they're going up like that. So we've got like a bit of that's how we can tell the path. It follows this path and this bank. So we can almost just pop in those trunks, look, getting higher until the last one's, the last one goes in there. I have to move that, that's gone a bit too far over, over the edge of the path on the other side. I can scrape that off gently, and I can always just go over. I don't want to rub the paper off, but I can just go over that anyway with a lighter greeny colour. That over. Yeah, so it's so nice because we just follow these lovely paths all the way. And we know it's disappearing behind the foliage. And then these last little bits that cross over this side I'm going to leave because obviously this goes behind it. So again, we've got this side, we've got loads of long ones, haven't we? So it's like having a little look at what colour you want. So these have got quite a lot of like dark on underside and then quite light on the other. So again, it's like, how do you recreate the ones in the background? They're a little bit more pastel those ones. So I am going to pop a little bit of a tint in with that, just so it's not so harsh in the background, because I want the ones in the foreground to take the stage. So again, just loading your brush up with plenty on the tip, and then you can just pop as many or as little. These are the ones in the background, so they're not really in focus. They'll get covered over in a bit, but they're going this way and that way and all over the place, as is nature, where they are all over. Just popping all of those in. That's so. Can't see these ones. And then when you're happy with those ones in the background, they do look really messy, those, but we're going to take some more structural ones, the darker ones, straight up. So, and these are kind of our more confident marks, really. So, more, yeah, the ones in the forefront. This one, there's another one that comes down here. We just really enjoy this bit because it's these have got gorgeous shapes in them. It's nice, isn't it, using having a go at using some different brushwork to kind of recreate the tree in the way that you see them. And there's another kind of quite gnarly tree here. And then we've got another one there, another one here. And then all of those little, the bits that come off the side. So there's these, again, these are a bit darker. That's why I did the ones in the background a bit lighter. These are slightly darker, like the front ones, even the branches. So we make those a bit darker coming off. The one's crossing over the front of it. That's what we got here. There we go. So we're just kind of adding to it. Now, obviously, we've still got some foliage to soften that down a bit because it's quite sticky at the moment. If we start to look, we'll see that there are some nice bright pops of green in there. Quite acidic again, aren't they? Quite yellowy. So again, you can just pop some yellows in. And then start to, follow a little bit of a branch maybe. Start to pop these little marks over the top so it feels like foliage. And again, it kind of, I'm just using it a little bit peeled, but just following a couple of branches across so it's actually attached to something. And then there's all these, coming out at the front. And then you just get the odd one in the top. So they've not all got foliage on, just a few. We're just looking really, that's what we're doing, isn't it? We're just looking really carefully to see which have got the foliage, which have got the soft foliage on, which haven't. And then this one that we said about this side here is you can then bring that across because some of those crisscross over. So bring that straight out. Make it a bit softer now. It's not got quite an edge on it. There we go. And then you can just kind of go through it and have a little look at the balance. And when I say balance, just mean, you can have a little look. Do you want to make any other areas across your picture lighter? Do you want to make any darker? Do you want to add more blue in a place? Do you bluebells? Is there anything that you want to change? And you might not know actually. There's one thing I'm noticing. Quite a lot of blue, nice bright blue here. So I'm going to add that to mine. Just there. Quite like that on that picture. So I'm going to add that onto mine. So you can just go have a little work through. The other thing is that you don't feel like you need to make a decision either today. Sometimes you need to kind of step away from it and think, come back to it the next morning and have a look with fresh eyes. Because sometimes you can, you've been looking so much that you can't actually see it anymore. But it's a really lovely one to do. And especially with the path leading through. So oh yeah, so that's great. And then the other thing is because we've got quite a few marks and things on, it's good to really take a step back and look at your work about a metre away, really. And then you'll really appreciate it much more than when when you're working over the top. But I hope you enjoyed that one and enjoyed all those lovely trees.